How do I find a new job? How can I make a career change? And the biggest question of all, can I really find a career that I love? Hey, my name is Jen Smith, and I believe career success doesn't have to be at the expense of living a radiantly happy and healthy lifestyle. As a former HR leader and recruiter turned career coach, I get what companies are looking for when hiring top talent. What that means for you is an unmatched combination of insider knowledge and the best kept secrets about making heart-based career changes and navigating the ups and downs of job searching in today's world of work. Whether you're a recent graduate navigating the job market for the first time or a seasoned professional ready for a career change, this show is for you. So grab your coffee or your kombucha, pull up a seat, and get ready to be challenged and inspired to move beyond your self-doubt and take the right next steps towards landing a career you love. Because you deserve a long, radiantly happy and healthy career. This is the Flourish Careers Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Careers Podcast. I'm Jen Smith, your host, and today I'm thrilled to be here for another installment of Flourishing Together, a monthly segment dedicated to curated conversations with industry insiders sharing wisdom and strategies to improve your work and well-being. Today, I am delighted to welcome Paige Arnof-Fenn. Paige is the founder and CEO of a global branding and digital marketing firm, Mavens and Moguls, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Her clients include Microsoft, Virgin, the New York Times Company, Colgate, venture-backed startups, as well as nonprofit organizations. She graduated from Stanford University and Harvard Business School. Paige serves on several boards, is a popular speaker and columnist who has written for Entrepreneur and Forbes. And I cannot think of a better person to bring on the show to talk about all things personal branding in the digital world. So Paige, welcome.
Thank you, Jen, for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yes, me too. So you have said that everyone is a brand in today's world, especially in our digital world. So talk to us a little bit about why personal branding in this digital world is no longer an option.
So, I meet people all the time who say to me, I'm not famous. I'm not Taylor Swift. I'm not LeBron James, Serena Williams, Beyonce. I'm not really a brand. I'm just, I just work at a company or I just own a flower shop or whatever. And unfortunately, that's not true today. I think everyone is a brand and needs to think of themselves as a brand because we're all using lots of social media platforms. You're all out there circulating, meeting people for coffee, for lunch. You might be interviewing for jobs. And the truth is, when you're out there and if you want to have a meeting with someone, if you want to be on their podcast, if you want to grab coffee or lunch, what do people do today? They Google you, they check you out on LinkedIn. And so they're deciding in real time, do I want to call this person back? Do I want to give 30 minutes of my life to go talk to them or go meet them? And they're making a decision based on your image, based on your brand. And, when you're out there on different platforms, you really need to think about what's the message you want to communicate. What do you want to be known for? What do you stand for? And if you're interviewing, absolutely positively, you have to assume the HR people are checking you out online. And being a brand helps you stand out. It helps you get remembered. And, it basically gives you real estate in people's mind so that when they have a problem that you can help them solve, they think of you first.
Yes.
If you're not a brand, you're a commodity. And commodities compete on price. And you don't want to be in that space because people don't pay for commodities. They want to get, those for as cheap as possible, whether it's, a person they're hiring or a product they're buying. So, if you want to be considered for great opportunities, if you want to be, remembered by people, you've really got to carve out a niche and own that niche so that you offer something unique, special, and different.
Yes. A couple things as you were talking that stood out, it kind of gave me a little zing as you were talking. So is who you are, what you stand for, recognized and remembered. So those, I think, are really key pieces of a personal brand. And then the uniqueness. Everyone's different and people want to know your story. And you're absolutely right. When I was a recruiter, the first thing I would do if I got a resume was click into LinkedIn. That's the first thing I do. As a consumer, if I'm looking up a new brand, the first thing I do is go to Instagram. So just having that presence around who you are and what you stand for can be a really big deal, whether you're building a business or your own personal brand. Now, I want to add to that because a lot of folks in my world relate their job title to their brand. And in my mind, a job title does not make you unique. It doesn't tell people what you stand for. It doesn't even showcase where you stand in a hierarchy anymore because a VP at one company is completely different than a VP at another company. And so I don't know, do you ever hear anyone talk about that or say that?
Yeah. I mean, as you said, titles can be like telling or totally generic,
Right.
VP of product or finance manager. What does that even mean today?
Yeah.
But, your point about going straight to LinkedIn to check people out, if you're a hiring manager or recruiter, LinkedIn is so much more than a resume or a Rolodex, a resume book or a Rolodex today. It's really the basis for building relationships, trusted relationships in the digital economy. Because, if I look you up, I'm going to see that almost definitely we're going to know a couple of people or maybe a lot of people in common. And, if you want the skinny on somebody, you pick up the phone or you drop an email and say, hey, Bob, Jen, I'm going to be on her podcast this week. How do you know her? What do you think of her? Is she cool? Like, is she fun to work with? What's the scoop? Because your brand is really how people talk about you when you're not in the room.
Ooh, yes,
and,
that's good.
You want people to say, oh my God, she was like my favorite colleague, or, she was my college roommate, or,
Yeah.
you don't really know the strength of those ties. Is this someone I know really well, or is it someone that I traded a business card with at a networking event 3 years ago and I really couldn't pick her out of a lineup?
Yeah.
So, you don't really know until you do a little back channel investigation.
Yes.
So, I think the great thing for people who are in the job market is using that kind of back channel network, because when you find out you've got mutual contacts on LinkedIn, you can gather a ton of intelligence on, who the person is, and people might know you from your job. And so you can get some intelligence that way, which is great. The other thing I want to talk about on social media, though, for me, LinkedIn is absolutely my primary platform of choice. But a lot of people spread themselves through a lot of different social media. And the thing about brands is a brand is a relationship you have with your customer or your target audience. And you want to build a authentic, trusted relationship. So a brand is a promise of a consistent experience that you're going to have. Think about it. When you walk into a Starbucks, when you walk into a McDonald's, you know what to expect. You know what it's going to look like. You know what it's going to smell like. You know what's on the menu. So, you want to be that consistent experience when people meet you, however it is that they meet you. And I think where people get into trouble, one of the mistakes I see on branding is that people try to be different things on different platforms. And you really want to build a consistent story. You want to, if you're really buttoned up on LinkedIn, that's great. But if they find you on X and you're trying to be kind of a snarky comedian, that might not sync up with the person on Facebook who's on vacation in a bikini on the beach. Like, you're putting out all these different messages and all these different images of yourself that don't necessarily sync up. So I don't know which version of you is going to show up at the lunch meeting or which version of you is going to be on the podcast, So you really want to make sure that you're sending very consistent messages out there so they know every time they have an interaction with your brand, you're really going to be what they're expecting, so that they don't get embarrassed or they don't get blindsided by, oh, I didn't realize this person had that side to them.
Yeah, that's a big deal. The consistency makes a difference. And I can even just share like a quick story around that from a like a recruiter lens too, is if I get somebody's resume and let's say it says they're, I don't know, a product specialist, and then all their, like their profile and all their bullets are kind of backing up the story as a product specialist. And then I go to their LinkedIn and it tells me that they're, a marketing leader. Maybe at one point, they wanted to become a marketing leader, but their documents aren't matching and it's telling a story that I don't really understand. And as a recruiter, I don't have time to figure out your story. So you've got to make sure that you're telling that consistent message across whatever the platforms are that you're using. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
But, that's not to say you can't kind of extend your brand or morph your brand. Like in my case, when I graduated from college in the 80s, I was an economics major. And my first job out of college was as a financial analyst on Wall Street. So, all of my kind of breadcrumbs on my resume out of college were very finance centric.
Yes.
But I realized early on in my job on Wall Street that it was probably not going to be my forever career. But I had made a 2-year commitment to the bank. And so I was going to honor my commitment, but I knew I wanted to go back to business school and figure out a different path for myself. And I kind of used my grad school to rebrand myself from a finance person to a marketing person, because the things that I really liked in my finance job were actually things that were more marketing oriented than finance oriented. A girlfriend pointed out to me that my favorite parts of my job on Wall Street, when the deals closed, whether you were raising money, buying a company, selling a company, the thing that I loved the most is when the transaction was done, we took an ad out in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times to announce the closure of the deal. We planned a closing dinner. And then at the dinner, we presented everyone with like a deal toy to honor the deal that we had all worked on together. And that was my absolute favorite part of the job for 2 years. And my girlfriend said, Paige, the things you like, the things that are like fun for you are advertising, event planning, and promotions. Those aren't finance things. Those are marketing things.
Ooh.
But I had never taken a marketing job in my marketing class in my life. I didn't even know what marketing was, to be honest.
Yeah.
I went to a liberal arts college. There were no marketing classes. But so when I went back to business school, marketing was a required class your first year. And I got the top grade in the class. I got a summer internship in marketing, and they made me an offer to come back after graduation. And I've been in marketing ever since. And my friend was absolutely right. Those qualities that were really intuitive to me, that were my strengths, really led me down a marketing career path, and I've never looked back.
I love this story. And this is so good for our heart-based career changers out there, and noticing those clues. And maybe you fell into something that you don't love, and then you're going to morph into something that you do, and noticing those clues and then kind of following that energy is really what it sounds like you did, which is huge. So congratulations on doing that. Now, go back to what you were saying around like morphing the brand. And so if you do want to make a career change, I don't know, like let's talk about some ways that someone could think about that. And the first thing that comes to mind for me, and maybe you can build on this, is that words matter. So when we're building a brand, words are going to matter. And if you're morphing, how can we morph that from, the Wall Street finance person to the marketing person?
So you do it in baby steps. You need to get practical real world experience, and you can do that tangentially. You can join a nonprofit board, and all kinds of nonprofits. They need fundraising, they need marketing, they need, to build their relationships in the community, to find people who might contribute, people to work there. And so you can gain valuable experience in other areas because you can pick up those skills either in your day job or in something that's more of a hobby or an interest. You could also take classes, do webinars, watch TED Talks.
Yep.
to pick up those skills. And then if you're blogging, you can write blog postings. You could contribute to other blogs if you don't want the pressure of having to carry your blog, and be the person constantly beating the drum. Find the blogs in the areas that you're interested in and be a guest contributor. Comment on those blogs. So if you're on LinkedIn, which everyone should be, you can use that as a thought leadership platform to post articles and talk about things that are relevant to the areas that you want to be known for and want to get experience in. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to kind of have a goal and take baby steps to get there. You can't do it overnight. It took me, like I said, the 2 years of graduate school. I took the required marketing class first year, and then second year, I took a lot of marketing electives to add to my kind of knowledge base. I got a summer internship. I did a special project with a professor in marketing. So I just built my credibility and experience so that I'd have something to talk about in the interviews with the recruiters and the hiring managers about. They didn't know me as Paige, the finance person, but then I had a lot of like vignettes and things I could talk about from real world experience on the marketing front. And, it's keywords that you need to understand. What are the important keywords to put in your LinkedIn profile, on your resume? Can you start peppering all your social media platforms, following the leaders in those fields and knowing what the trends are, knowing what people are talking about so that you're relevant and current in the industry you're trying to break into?
Yes, and yes. You are speaking my language. Those tiny baby steps. You're right. Go try it out. Join a board or do some volunteer work. And that's going to help you learn the language. It's going to help you gain those skills and experiences that you can then talk about when the time comes. And I love the idea of contributing to other blogs. Like you don't have to, a lot of times people get nervous, kind of posting their own content or writing a blog and putting it out there, but you can be a contributor to others. And I've found that a lot of folks are always looking for support and content. And so if
Absolutely.
you can share,
it is a huge responsibility to start your own blog. And again, that's a big mistake a lot of people make, where their eyes are bigger than their stomach. You start it, you get your blog up and running, and the first week you're so excited and you post like 3 things. And then the second week you're a little busier, so you only get 1 post up, but you're not even commenting on the people making comments. And then you're away for a week because you're at a conference, and then you come back and you're buried, and then you're not feeling well. So 3 weeks pass and you've only done 1 more blog post. And what have you done? You've basically trained your audience to say, I'm kind of flaky. You can't really take me seriously on this. It's not a priority. That is not a good way to build a strong brand. So before you kind of bite off too much, I'm a huge proponent of finding blogs that are already well trafficked, that other people are keeping the conversation going. And you can just contribute and chime in on the stuff that you're passionate about, where you have a point of view and an opinion, and make sure you put a little signature at the bottom. And you get to be known as, every time Jen posts something, I agree with her. Every time Jen makes a comment, I think she's so smart. She always adds something really interesting. She opens kind of my perspective on this. It's given me a kind of a new approach. And, you're like a regular contributor, which the person who owns the blog really appreciates, because it is a lot of pressure, even for people that are consistent. It's great to have people to keep the conversation going and to add a new, fresh perspective. So I definitely think blogging is a huge responsibility. So don't make that decision lightly.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And the consistency is so critical, because I've even experienced it myself, where I'll start following like a podcast or a newsletter or a blog or something. And then all of a sudden the person's gone. I'm like, where did you go? I loved your stuff. And like, they're gone. And it's frustrating. And it just really, it bums me out. So yeah, the consistency is big. I'll just share a quick story. When I first started Flourish, I knew I wanted to have a newsletter, but I was so afraid of that commitment. So I started quarterly. I started with a quarterly newsletter and I committed to that.
That is so smart because if you say you're coming out weekly or bi-weekly, you're setting that expectation.
Right.
You did exactly the right thing. I always tell people there's nothing wrong with a monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly newsletter. And as long as you have built that expectation in and it works for you, it really is consistent with kind of your tempo. That's the way you want to do it. That's the way, again, to build a trusted brand and have an ongoing conversation with your audience. And they know that every quarter they're going to get quality content from you. So that is absolutely perfect what you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you get used to it, you can change it up. So like I started quarterly, now I do monthly. And so it's just really what's going to work for you, but I love that. Like just don't overcommit. Now, I have a question. This is something I personally struggle with as well. So there's so many platforms out there and so much content. So how can professionals kind of cut through the noise and make sure that their presence actually stands out instead of just adding to all of the clutter that's out there?
So you need to be kind of honest with yourself and understand where you are going to be showcased your strengths the best. As I said, for me, it's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a professional platform. It's great for B2B service businesses where you can be a thought leader. You can post and build a quality relationship with people. And you can do a lot of really good networking on LinkedIn without going out to events. They're really, using strategic keywords. Having a really full profile with a good summary and a picture, all the things to really make your profile stick out. I do think it is a mistake if you spread yourself too thin. So you don't need to be everywhere. Think about what audiences are important to you and where are they going to look for you?
Right.
Because for me, people are not looking for me on Facebook. They're not looking for me on Instagram. That is not how people make a decision to hire marketing talent that I'm offering. But it's okay if you pick a couple, but I would be very careful not to get overwhelmed and spread yourself too thin.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be more passive. If you just want to follow certain people, on Twitter, X, I think like 90% of the people are just watching like the 10% who are really, they're retweeting and they're just following trends and trying to stay up on pop culture. That's totally fine. You don't have to get in the middle of the conversation. It's okay to be passive on ones if you just, if Facebook's really just for you to post pictures for the grandparents to stay up, that's fine. But just be honest about why you're there, because it really is a slippery slope, I think, when people panic and they think they're getting left behind and they're like, oh, I've got to have a profile. And what's the latest one? Blue Sky. And now, I just think that's kind of chasing the squirrel and you're just going to, make yourself crazy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think from, if you think about like a professional or a career changer or a job seeker, it's really going back to that brand and what do you want to be known for? What do you stand for? And then who are you trying to attract to you? So if you're looking for a job in maybe like design in a creative industry, then maybe Instagram or Pinterest might be a good place for you to hang out, right? So it really just depends kind of. And the other thing I would say is, where do you personally like to hang out? Because if someone's told me like, oh, you should be on YouTube. I'm like, I don't ever go on YouTube. I don't like YouTube. Like, I'm not going to be on YouTube, So it's like, think about where you like to engage and you're more likely that energy is going to kind of come through when you're posting or sharing or curating or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, if it's authentic to you, it will come off that way to other people. I think if it's not playing to your strengths, it can be a waste of time and a distraction. And again, it just dilutes the quality of your brand.
Exactly. And the other thing I wanted to mention here too that comes to mind is like there is a lot of noise. And what I struggle with, it's not all the platforms. I struggle with, there's just like, if you just think of LinkedIn, there's so much. And so there's just so much noise. And so how do you kind of rise above that or even share something worthwhile when there's so much stuff? But then I go back and think about like, what do I have that's unique? Like what's different? What different lens do I have? And I think the same thing for job seekers and career changers is that you have a story, you have your own personal stories and experiences that people want to hear about that might even help others, that can help build your brand. And so kind of sticking maybe to even that, like your own personal experiences and stories can be helpful as well.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
And I always think too, like there's so many robots, like we were talking before we hit record about like the AI, like there's so much generic stuff out there and there's so many robots and, companies and hiring managers want to hire humans, not robots or corporate jargon, and one other thing that's coming to mind here as we're talking is a lot of times folks are like, oh, I'm too nervous to like, and I think I mentioned this before with like the blog or, being that guest contributor. But the other thing you can do that I think is really helpful, as long as it's related to your brand and what you want to talk about, is to curate and share other people's stuff. So, if say you want to become a thought leader in, tech, maybe that's obviously a trend that's going so fast. Like maybe if you keep up on this stuff regularly because you like it, you can share a couple articles that you found interesting versus having to create your own stuff that's still going to lead to your brand, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, the AI comment you make is so true. Oh, yeah. I mean, there is so much generic robotic copy out there that just... it's like wallpaper and, it's your eyes glaze over. And I think in this day and age, in the digital world, where humans stand out, it's like you've got your origin story, you've got the good, the bad, the ugly, your personal experience, your vulnerabilities, the things that worked, your war stories, the warts and the pimples, how you survived, how you got through it. And that's what's going to stand out. That's what people are going to remember. And the robots can't compete with that. They don't have those kind of, roller coaster rides where, you can talk about, oh my God, we were in the trenches and we stayed up all night and pulled an all-nighter and pulled it off. Or it, exploded and it was a disaster. And here's what we learned from it. That's the thing that people remember. That's what people gravitate to. And that's where you can really stand out versus your competition and all the generic stuff that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I totally agree with you. And sharing that, also you can pull people along with you. Sometimes if someone's going through something similar and they're reading about your war story and they don't feel so alone, and maybe that sparks a conversation or a new professional friend or whatever it is. So
exactly.
Yeah. Now, speaking of stories, can you share a story where you helped either an individual or an organization kind of elevate their online presence? Like maybe give us like a before and after. And I know you shared your story of finance to marketing, which was fabulous, but maybe another one just so we can get an understanding.
So the important thing in marketing and branding is you really want to own specific real estate in your customer's brain. And so whether you're a consultant or a money manager or a recruiter, the broader your area, the less memorable you are. So what you want is you want to own a specific niche. Like you don't need to be everything to everybody. We helped a woman who was a money manager. Again, there are a ton of money managers out there. There are a ton of lawyers, accountants. But it turned out when we really dug into her business, what we learned was her sweet spot was women who came into a large amount of money, either through inheritance, divorce, a windfall. They sold their company. And when you look at the wealth management arena, there are a lot of men in the area, in that arena. And so she was a woman-owned business, and her specialty were women who came into tremendous wealth. And so what she did with our help is kind of rebrand her practice to be, she was going to be your partner in helping these women figure out their strategy post this wealth event. And everything in her website, in the materials, the brochures, when she met people at networking events, her business card, her tagline, everything was around that niche market. And what we learned with her is whenever anybody, and she was here in New England, whenever anybody found out that a woman they knew, maybe her husband or her father died and left her a ton of money, or she just went through a very high profile divorce, maybe she just sold a very successful tech company, people started like, oh, I heard, I'm so sorry to hear about your spouse or your parents. I'm so sorry to hear, but, it turns out, I don't know who you're working with, but if you haven't met with Barbara, you probably would want to have a meeting with her, because I hear really good things about her. And I know several women in your situation who've had very good experiences with her. And so this, it seemed like she was at the grocery store, she was at the soccer game, she was at the networking event, and this woman's name kept coming up. So of course she reaches out, has a meeting, and then hires her to work with her. And what that did is it kind of, built so much confidence, because she knew this was a brand that kind of got her, understood her, had success with people just like her. Mm-hmm. And that's an incredibly powerful niche that your ecosystem is doing your marketing for you. Mm-hmm. And it basically sends a signal that this person is competent, qualified, well-respected, successful. I want to work with them. So it's not like working with some generic, man who maybe has good returns on his portfolio, but how is he going to really help me? He doesn't really know me. He doesn't really understand me. This woman, can, connect her to so many different resources because she's been doing it in this niche very successfully. Mm-hmm. So I think the lesson is, you really want to own a very targeted niche, which can be incredibly profitable. You don't have to be everything to everybody. In fact, you want to just be really important to a small group. And for a lot of businesses, that's great. Architects who specialize in sustainability, LEED certified, buildings, that's the person. If that's important to you, you want to go to that person, not mm-hmm. a generic architect, right. An accountant who really understands small businesses. You want somebody who really lives, breathes, dies your niche, because especially in B2B services, that is a huge competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word specialty and unique and don't be generic kind of keeps coming up. And I love what you said about the ecosystem does the marketing for you. So same thing in your career. If you are a marketing person and you specialize in something really specific, letting people know what that is. If you're a career coach and you specialize in something really specific, let people know what that is. And then people will talk and it just kind of works for you. And, then the networking piece, there's so much in there. So I love that example too. Women that come into money. I think that's a really cool example of niching down.
Niche.
Yeah, it really is.
Niche. So it's all the roads converge to conspire to help you find your audience. And that's what you want. It makes everything so much easier. And, it's there's a reason behind it. It makes sense. And it sets you up for success.
Yes, I totally agree. Now, I want to just, before we kind of come to a close here, I want to go back to LinkedIn one more time because we've talked about it a bunch. I think it's one of the most important tools, even more important than a resume in today's world of job searching and careers and all the things. So tell me, what are some of the most effective ways to leverage LinkedIn for career growth? We talked about a couple of them, but tell me what else comes to mind for
you. For me, you want to make sure you've got kind of a fully baked profile. Don't leave blanks. Make sure you have a professional picture, the headline. Make sure you have at least 500 contacts. After 500, it just says 500 plus. And I think for these people that have, 212 contacts, you don't look very relevant today. You don't look like somebody who's really in the know. And I've networked with people, young professionals who, after we meet, they want to stay in touch. And I said, well, feel free to send me a connection link and we can link on LinkedIn. And they're like, oh, I don't really do that. I'm like, that's a big mistake. It's a missed opportunity, especially if you're young in your career and you're in the job market. Anytime you have an informational interview, every time you make a good contact, send them a link to connect, because it's a great way to stay in touch. You can update your status. And then also, after you find a job, it's a great way to let your network know, I just want to give you an update. I really appreciate the time you took when I was looking for a position. I want to let you know I took a job. Here's where I landed. Here's where I am. Would love to stay in touch. It shows professionalism. It shows good manners, and it's very appropriate. It's a great way to stay connected without stalking people.
Yes.
And as I said, from a thought leadership standpoint, whether you are creating your own content or, as you said, curating other content that you like in your industry or category, you can post I read this great article, and for those of you interested, here's a link. Again, you're a giver. You're somebody who's putting information out there. And when you do that, when people see your name in their inbox, they really appreciate it. It's like a welcome invitation. Mm-hmm. They're giving you permission to, reach out to them. And if they're clicking through, that's really gold, because they're giving you some time and some bandwidth. So you definitely want to take advantage of the fact that, it's a platform that lends itself, I think, whether you're new in your career or, more established, it's just a great way to stay connected and to build those trusted relationships in a digital economy.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I'll add to that it's easy. It's not difficult to set up a profile. You mentioned the photo and the headline is really important. I think of it like a newspaper headline. Like, what do you want people to know about you? It's not your job title, but what do you want people? So just the photo, the headline, the about section, and maybe some of your experience. And that's it. Like, you're good. It's easy to set up and it's easy to use. You don't have to be posting everything. You can just use it for that strategic networking element. When you think of that network effect, I love with LinkedIn, you can see your first connections and then you can see your second and third level connections. And that is so powerful. Like, no other platform is going to allow you to do that in the business world. And you can connect people all over the world, which is so cool with a click of a button. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Now, this month's theme is all about spring cleaning. So if you were to share maybe one or two actionable steps that listeners could take today to refresh their online presence, what would you say?
So again, we've talked about it a little bit today, but I think in branding and in marketing, less can be more. So if you're seeing stuff that you maybe set up when you were in college or set up during a period of your career where you were exploring different areas that have turned out not to be as interesting or as productive for you, you can kind of pair off, cut off the things that are no longer working for you and double down on the ones that are, and you can basically look at 2025 and say, I would like to be doing more blogging, or I would like to be publishing more content, and decide, like, I'm going to stop doing X so that I can do more Y. And look at what's on your priority list. Look at what has benefited your career the most over the last year or two. If you kind of deconstruct, figure out where your best customers or best clients have come from. Maybe you need to be doing more search engine optimization. Maybe you need to be doing more thought leadership. Maybe you don't need to be photographing every meal you eat and putting it on Instagram, because although it might be fun for you, it's more of a distraction and it's not really leading to productive conversations. Think about the networking groups that you've gotten involved in. Some of them may be more productive than others. Some could be a waste of time. Or maybe you realize your alma mater alumni clubs are very productive for you and you need to get more involved in those and less involved in others. So just, again, always be doing kind of a postmortem on things that, what was good, what was bad, what do we want to continue, what do we want to cut back? Because you can't just constantly be adding more to your dance card. You need to be selective and take things off that are not working as well so that you can put more time and energy into the things that are working well.
That is great guidance. And I'm going to take you up on that in my own self. I think that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Paige. Now, as we come to a close, I always like to ask our guests, what's one book or podcast or resource that has had a significant impact on your career? And why would you recommend it to our listeners? We call these our flourishing favorites.
So it's kind of an old school book.
That's okay.
Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's kind of evergreen advice.
Yep.
It's nice reminders, I think, about things that, my mother or grandmother would have said, like, I've been telling you these things forever. I think, just being more deliberate and intentional and thoughtful and focusing on the relationships that you have, those are gold. It was relevant 100 years ago when he wrote the book, and it's stuff that's still true today.
Yes, I love the oldies but goodies. We haven't had anyone mention that one yet, so great call out.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm glad.
Paige, this has been such a fun conversation. I really appreciate you joining me today and sharing your insights and wisdom on all the nuances of personal and digital branding. So where can people find you?
Best place is my website, mavensandmoguls.com, or LinkedIn, where even though my last name is hyphenated, it's all smushed together on LinkedIn, but that's always good to find me there.
Perfect. We'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jen. It was a great chatting with you today.
Listeners, as always, the notes from today's episode will be on the blog at flourish.careers/blog. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.